Hi guys, today's artsy tech tutorial is all about making wedding invitations perfect for the upcoming spring and summer wedding season. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Shayda Campbell and today I'm going to show you how to make watercolor floral wedding invitations using your own watercolor artwork. What I've done is I've actually painted some flowers and leaves. Now I'm not going to get into this today, it's just going to make for such a long tutorial, but I will link similar tutorials on watercolor painting in the video description. Today we are going to work mainly in Photoshop. I know it's like dun dun dun, Photoshop. I myself am terrified basically of Photoshop. It is frustrating and overwhelming sometimes, I get that, but it's also a very powerful tool. A lot of what I know about Photoshop, I've learned from Chris. He's really good with it, but I guess what I'm getting at is that I know to go slow. I'm not going to rush ahead, and if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments below and I'll try to get back to you. Let's just jump into it, and I hope at the end you'll feel that you can make your own invite with your beautiful watercolor artwork. So the very first thing we're going to do today is get this painting into the computer. Now I'm going to scan mine, but you can also take a photo. And what I'm doing here is I painted so many flowers and leaves. I don't really need that many, so I just checked off a few. That way, once the image is in the computer, I know which ones I like best and which ones are worth lifting. So I am just scanning mine in. If you have a scanner, you probably know what settings you like best. I've got my resolution set to 600 dpi, but normally 300 dpi, 300 dots per inch is fine. So we're gonna get this into the computer, and I'm gonna scan mine directly into Photoshop, but basically you just want to get your scan or your photo into Photoshop. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and the very first thing I want to do is go up to File and go to Save As, and I want to save this as a Photoshop document, as a PSD. So I'm going to save both the TIFF, the original file from the scanner, and the PSD in the same folder, but now we're working on a Photoshop doc. All right, now we need to start lifting these leaves. So we are going over to the lasso tool. That's the third one down on the toolbar. You can also press L. And I'm going to use that lasso tool. You see me moving it along with my cursor here to separate the greens. And this is a personal preference, but I do think it's easier to work in one color at a time. I'll do all the blues and grays as one, and I'll do all the greens to start. I'm going to press Command J, and that is going to make those greens into a second layer. So Command J to make that lasso selection a separate layer. Let's do this one more time for everyone like me that never understands something on the first try. So I am now selecting all the blues and grays, again using the lasso tool. That's the L or the third tool down in the toolbar, and I'm just going all the way around. It's selected. I'll press Command J, and that is going to make those blues and grays into another layer. So now you can see I've got two separate layers, and I can work on those. And what we're going to do in this tutorial is work on the greens, and I'm going to show you how to lift each of these and make them into a separate PNG that you can use to create a beautiful invite. So we're going to come over here. We are using the Magic Wand tool. Okay, and now what we're going to do is come over here and click on the negative space. Classic Photoshop mistake. I don't have the right layer selected, so the magic wand's not going to do anything. Select your correct layer. The layer 1 is my green leaves. Then grab that magic wand tool. Make sure you have that as your tool, and then you're going to click on the negative space. Now you can see the wand is in action, and it has selected the green leaves, but it's selected too much. It thinks part of our greens, our light greens, our negative space. So we're going to come up here and change the tolerance. We're going to lower it from 100 to 20. And now when we click, you can see that it's really captured the perimeter of those leaves, and it's going to remove what is in fact negative space, and it's not going to take any of the leaf with it. There's some areas where we'll need to fix. This one here is so light, but I think for the most part, we have set the tolerance correctly and it looks good. All right, with that done, what we are going to do is we are going to do some layer masking. So we're going to go over to the Layers menu, go down to Layer Mask, then you are going to go to Hide Selection. So Layer, Layer Mask, Hide Selection. And you can see because we had the negative space selected, that is now gone. It is not deleted. However, which is nice, we can always get it back. That's what's so great about layer masks. But you can see most of the work has been done for us. This actually looks pretty good, and Photoshop really did that. We've barely even gotten started. Next, we're gonna come over to our right-hand panel here, and we are gonna refine our layer mask. So click Select and Mask. And the great thing about layer masks, as I just said, is that they're non-destructive, so nothing is actually deleted. So now we can go in and fix up any little areas that need a little bit of tweaking. Now, over on your left, you'll see the panel has changed slightly. The third one down here is our brush tool. You'll see a positive and negative at the top. Since we're gonna erase first, we want the negative to remove, and we're gonna just slide that across, so just simple brush, and we're getting rid of some of that negative space that was picked up as green. So we'll get rid of all of that stuff. Now for an area like this, where there's a lot of negative space, there's an easier way than using that brush tool. And that easier method is to use the Quick Selection tool. So if we go back over to our left-hand tool panel here, it is the top icon. The top icon is the Quick Selection, W. And what we are going to do is click and drag on that negative space, and it's sort of like having a smart eraser. It just knows what to get rid of. It does quite a good job, and you can see this is looking really good now. We'll also use our brush tool again. Again, make sure it's on the negative so that you're removing. And we're just gonna get rid of all that sort of edge, paper edge up along the top. And just to finish things off, let's use this brush tool but on positive. And this is really the power of a layer mask, is that it is non-destructive so that we can always add things back in. That's pretty amazing. So I'm going to take my brush and just sort of reshape this leaf. Now, a jagged edge can be nice. A jagged edge is a great way to express paper texture when you have beautiful hand-lettered calligraphy or watercolor paintings, but sometimes it's definitely not what you want, and you can use this brush tool to reshape, and that's pretty amazing. Okay, and you can continue to use the brush tool and the Quick Selection to refine your leaves or your flowers. And then what I like to do when I'm getting towards the end is to come over here, use the Shape tool to make a rectangle. We're gonna make it bright red. It doesn't look pretty, but that's okay. And I am going to create that bright red rectangle. I'll use the layers to move it underneath. And then of course you can really see where your mistakes are, if there are any. And of course take into consideration that you're likely printing onto cream or white paper. And if you do have a dark colored invite, then you're gonna really have to be very precise. All right, next we are going to come over here. We have our greens layer. We are gonna right click on the mask and click Apply Layer Mask, and that is going to make that permanent. Now what we need to do is make sure that all of these leaves are their own graphic. We want a bunch of different leaf graphics, so that is our next order of business. I'm gonna come over here, grab my lasso tool again, L, and I am going to go around one leaf. Then I come over here, I click, I make sure I'm on the right layer, click Command J, and that will make that one into a separate layer, and you can see that there when I blind the original. Let's do that again. I'm going to use my lasso tool and go capture one leaf, then I Command J, and it makes just that one into its own layer. And we will just continue doing that so that we're gonna have all these great graphics that we can use to build a beautiful invite. And you could really use them for so many different things. There's so many wonderful uses for clip art. You could design a wedding invite, and then you could use these later on some of the envelopes or the RSVP cards, because you've got all these wonderful graphics that you can work with and play around with and come up with many multiple designs. So once all these leaves are separate layers, what I'm doing is just making sure all the other extraneous bits like the red rectangle and the background are invisible. Then I'm going to go to File, and we want to export these as separate layers. So we go Export Layers to Files, and that will make them all each leaf will be its own layer. And we're just going to figure out where we are going to put them on our desktop. I'll make a folder for this clip art, and then you can do a file name. If we call these green leaves, it'll be green leaves 1, green leaves 2, so it keeps it quite organized. You want to make sure that you have PNG selected so that it will have a transparent background. JPEGs can't have a transparent portion, and then make sure transparency is also selected. Click Run, and it will export all of those into that folder that you selected. Let's just go take a look at what that looks like. We'll go into my desktop, my Finder over here, and we are looking for our clip art folder, and you can see all of them are separate PNGs. And not only do you have all these separate graphics, but one other nice thing about the layers to files export is that the border is tight to the graphic, to the leaf itself, so you don't have any extra space there. All right, now that we've checked those over, we're gonna go back into Photoshop and we're gonna continue lifting some of our blue and gray leaves, some of our pink flowers, but I just wanna mention again that you really don't need this many separate leaves and flowers to create a beautiful invite, so don't go overboard, don't overwhelm yourself. Now that we've made all those beautiful graphics out of our own painting, we're going to move on to the design portion. And I always start by kind of getting some inspiration by looking at other wedding invites or invitations in general. I like this one here. This circular format is very pretty because I don't necessarily know what a good invite looks like. So kind of going through Google Images or something like Pinterest and pulling some examples can be so helpful. And I think this is the sort of style that I'm going to use today, where the florals are kind of growing onto the page from one side, either from the top or the corners. I think that's just a good place to start. It's a very simple sort of design element to choose, to have all the flowers going one direction. And because I'm not an invite designer, that seems like a good thing, to choose one that looks approachable. So I'm going back to Photoshop. And I will click Create New. We're going to make a new document. Along the top here, you can see print, web, art. We are using print because we are going to print this. I'm usually making web graphics, but not today. I'm going to title it Invite, and then I need to think about the size. So I'm going to make my invite 5x7. So I want my artboard in Photoshop to reflect those dimensions, and that's what we'll do. So there we go. Now what I want to start doing is bringing in all those beautiful graphics I created. So I'll go to File, Place Embedded, File and Place Embedded, and you can bring in your graphics. I'll just choose one. There's a lot, I admit, I did too many. So I'm going to bring that in, and then when it's brought into Photoshop, you can resize it automatically. If you need to resize again, make sure you're on the Move tool, which is V. So grab that or press V, and that's the one you're using so often for this process, the Move tool. Then you click Command T. Command T brings that box up around it, and you can resize, you can rotate, you can do all that stuff once you've selected Command T with the Move tool. Now let me show you something else. If you can have your clip art folder sort of aligned here on top of your Photoshop window, then you can just click and drag, and that's nice, that's simple, and it allows you to kind of see all of them and think, oh, which one would look good in this spot? And then basically, once this process gets started, all I can tell you is try to pick a design that is simple, like the flowers growing onto the page or moving onto the page from the top. And then it really is just about trial and error, trying different things, size some flowers a little larger than others, or make some leaves smaller and bigger. Those simple differences can make for a more interesting design, although you want them all to look relative to one another. But all I'm gonna do is bring in some of my favorites and start playing around. It's kind of like putting together an artistic puzzle. It's fun. It can be a little overwhelming if you've never done design and layout. It can be a bit, but just stick with it. A lot of trial and error, as I said. And this, what you're watching, I have sped this up a lot. This took me, my final layout took me about 60 minutes, about an hour. So I was just trying different things, flipping the leaves and flowers around in different directions, and just playing with it until I got it looking the way I wanted it to. Each flower and leaf, of course, is brought in as a separate item, a separate layer, and you have sort of a list of them over here on your right-hand menu. You can see all of them. The one that I'm working with will be the one that's selected in light gray. Now, if a stem of a leaf is sitting on top of a flower and you want it behind, all you have to do is drag that leaf graphic down in that panel on the right-hand side. And those are just in the order. So the one that's on the top of that menu is the one that is on the top of all the other elements of all the other PNGs or graphics. So that's how you get things to lie in behind or on top of one another. But yeah, this is my process, and I am going to skip ahead, I think, because I don't want to bore you with the long process that is finding just the right design. Okay, as I finish up my invite, the floral portion, I wanted to show you one other thing. When you bring in a leaf or a flower, let's talk about resizing. You press Command T with your Move tool to resize it. So Move tool V, Command T, there you've got those boxes. Hold Shift to keep the aspect ratio, to keep it looking the way you expect it to. And if you don't hold Shift, you're actually able to stretch it and pull it. So if you want a leaf that's a little thinner, just don't hold Shift down when you're changing that up. And it's your illustrations, it's your watercolors. So if you want one to be completely different than it was when it was imported, I think that's totally fine and can help you to create a more well-designed piece, a piece that really fits together beautifully. Okay, I just need to work on these a little bit longer. I'm layering all the leaves together, some lighter ones in the background, some smaller, darker ones on top, and I think I finally have a design that I'm really happy with. I just need to get rid of this little guy down here, delete, and I think that's looking good. I love the way the colors are working together, and all the leaves are sort of just coming onto the page in the nicest, most delicate way. So what I want to do now is simply add some text, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Go back to Google, look at invites. What sort of wording do they use? How do they invite people? What sort of texts are common? Is it a lot of cursive written hand-lettered text, or is it mostly serif or sans serif? So just take a peek and see what you like also. Some of them have some really beautiful hand-lettered text, and if your font book doesn't have those, you can purchase fonts on Etsy. Etsy is a great place to get them, and they're like $5 for a font. So if you are actually doing a wedding invite that's important to you, think about that. I'm gonna do something like this one, just with some really nice serif fonts. Always a good go-to for me. I am never mad at Times New Roman. So come back into Photoshop, click the T for text, get on that text tool, and up here along the top, you've got your menu where you can choose which font, the size, the color, all of those things. And I did not change my color from red. I will just go up there and we'll put that at black. And yeah, I'm not going to get too in depth with this because I think the text in Photoshop is pretty simple. I just don't want to sort of bog you down with all that. But again, just looking on Google to kind of get a little bit of inspiration, not to copy, but just to get inspired. Okay, I like how they used a serif font for the names, and then maybe a calligraphy font for one line of text, but not for all of it, and those sort of little decisions. One other thing I will mention though is tracking. Tracking is so important, you guys. And tracking refers to the amount of space between the letters. So on the Audrey holiday, I have just changed the tracking over here in our properties panel to 250. See how different that looks compared to the Hank? And then when I adjust the tracking on that one, they just look so much better. And that took me such a long time to realize. When I started blogging, I never understood why my web fonts just didn't have the polish that I wanted them to. And it was really all about the spacing in between those letters. So think about that when you are designing your stationery or your invite. And this is what mine looks like when it was all done. And then I printed it off, and this is what it looked like. And I just noticed a few little things. So always do a test print. And I noticed, the and was sort of weirdly big. Like, why is the and so big? It's not that important. And I thought the colors could be made slightly richer. So we are going to do that, but we are going to do that by grouping. So I group I select all the florals, Command G to make a group. We also did that with the text, select all the text layers, Command G. And then we can make adjustments to just one group or the other. So group 2 is my florals, that's it there. I'll come up here to the adjustments, and I'm gonna start with the brightness and contrast and just up the contrast a little bit to make those flowers really deep and dark and really pop off the page. And once you're happy with that, just hover over that, click Option and hover, and that will make this little black arrow appear, and that is going to apply that adjustment to just the group that you want it to. You can see here if I turn the brightness way down, it's just doing that to the floral group. So, and then you can play around. Again, I don't want to bog you down with too much info, but you could change up the colors. The saturation could be a little darker. I like to work with the color adjustment, and I always tend to add a little blue and a little red. I just like something that's purpley, that has those red and blue undertones as opposed to, you know, yellow and green undertones. So I kind of like a cool color palette, and I can do that in Photoshop. Now I'm ready to print that again. I'll do another test print, and I should mention that this is so important that you also print on good quality paper. Use a nice matte cardstock, the heaviest your printer can handle. I'm using a 90-pound watercolor paper, and it is just beautiful, and it's gonna look even more like real watercolors. I'm gonna leave it there. I know it's a lot of info, but I hope you feel like you've learned something today and that you might print your own invites. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.